One of people's big concerns when coming to Mexico is getting gringo priced. And I get this because we all want to be treated fairly, and getting charged a higher price because your skin is a few shades lighter just doesn't feel right. So in this video, I'm going to talk about when you are likely to get gringo priced, when it's probably pretty unlikely, and also what you can do about it to keep it from happening. First up is going to a restaurant and getting charged more because you're not from there. I've been living in Mexico for almost 6 years now, and I've been all around the country. And only one time in all of that time have I received a menu that had higher prices than the normal prices. And this was in a cruise ship stop in Mahahual, Quintana Roo. Okay, so what happened is I go into this restaurant and they give me a menu in dollars and in English. I thought that was peculiar because a lot of times you'll get an English menu if you're in a tourist area, but to have it in dollars and in English, that was really weird. So I'm like, hey, do you have a peso menu? So then they go and get me the menu that's in pesos and in Spanish, and the prices were twice as high on the dollar menu. They were literally half the price on the peso Spanish menu. But that was a very unique situation, and I've only had it happen once in the hundreds or the thousands of restaurants that I've been to all across the country. So maybe if you're going to a place where it's a cruise ship stop where almost all of the tourism comes from the cruise ships, maybe be a little bit more careful there. And if you get a menu that's in dollars and in English, ask for one in pesos. So let's say you want to live in Mexico for a longer period of time. So you go on Google and you search Casa en Renta Guadalajara, house for rent in Guadalajara. And you come across all of these real estate websites that have thousands upon thousands of listings of places for rent. These are not gringo prices. These are the prices for everybody. Now there might be a little bit of negotiating room, but it's usually not more than a few thousand pesos of flexibility. But if you're walking down the street and you're looking for rent signs, and you see a Se Renta sign on a house and you're interested in that, well, if you call to find out the price and they hear that you're not Mexican, they might be thinking, hey, I think I can get a little bit more money out of this guy. So then they tell you the price is $15,000 instead of the $10,000 they actually want. So if you're ever in a situation like that where you see a Se Renta sign, get a Mexican friend to call for you and find out the price, because after your Mexican friend learns the price, that's going to be the price for you and they're not going to raise it later. In this video, I'm referring to it as a gringo price because that's what most people say. However, in most cases, I think it isn't a gringo price, but it's more like a I think you have money price. So I think you can pay more, so I'm going to charge you more. Next is taxis. Taking a taxi in a tourist town can be a place where you really get ripped off as a foreigner. Like a ride that's supposed to cost $2 might cost you $20, for example. This happens very frequently. So how do you avoid this? Well, first of all, you can use Uber if there is Uber. Sometimes now in some cities, like where I'm living in Querétaro, there's actually an official taxi app that's going to tell you the price. And then there's also apps like InDrive, for example. So InDrive is kind of cool. It's kind of like Uber, but instead of Uber telling you the fare, InDrive, you put in the fare that you're willing to pay, and it will usually say, hey, we recommend you putting in this fare, and then you get offers from drivers, and you can accept or decline their offers and see their ratings before you do so. So using one of those apps can be a great way to avoid getting ripped off by a taxi. However, those apps are banned in some tourist places in Mexico, so sometimes you're forced to take a taxi. So what can you do in that situation? Well, talk to a local and find out what the real taxi fare should be around town. And most of the time, that's going to allow you to get a pretty fair price on your taxi. One trick I've learned when it comes to taxis is to look for the older taxi drivers, because it seems like the older they are, the less BS they want to deal with, and they're more likely to give you a fair price than the younger driver who's more likely to negotiate really hard and try to get as much money out of you as possible. There's some places where it's just not going to happen, like in Tulum, for example. They're going to rip you off everywhere, no matter whether you're light-skinned like me or whether you're a Mexican coming from Mexico City. They're going to rip you off no matter who you are, because that's just how taxis are there. But in most cases, in most towns, in most cities, you can avoid it by using those apps or finding out what the price should be. And who do you ask to find out the real price of a taxi? Well, if you're staying in an Airbnb, the Airbnb host is a great person to ask because they typically live there and are often from there. But also anybody around. You can go into a souvenir shop where the person speaks English and ask them, hey, what should a taxi cost around here? And they'll let you know. Another great way to avoid the sky-high taxi fares in some towns is to learn how the public transportation system works. For example, I was in Tulum once, going from the beach side to the town side, and the taxi driver wanted, I forget, like $25 for like 10-minute ride. Well, what I did is I hopped on the Colectivo, which was about $2.50, and took that into town instead. The Colectivos, little combis, or a bus. Those are going to be the same price for everybody, and they're going to be very affordable. Let's say you're going into some stores and you're shopping for some souvenirs or handicrafts. This is a place where it's super common to get gringo priced. So at a lot of these stores, especially in popular tourist destinations, there are huge markups on the items. So for example, one time I was in the state of Colima and I saw this little turtle made out of rock. And at that store, in this place that's not a tourist destination at all, it was 100 pesos. I went to Playa del Carmen and saw the same turtle in a store there, 1,600 pesos, a 1,600% markup on this turtle. So that gives you an idea of how high the markups can be sometimes. If you're going to a place where it's a super popular tourist destination, well, this is a situation in where it's very likely to get gringo priced. You're less likely to get gringo priced if you're going into a store where all the prices are marked. However, if you're going into a shop where the prices are not marked and you have to ask what the price is, this is a situation where they may often try to get as much out of you as possible. So how do you avoid this? Well, number one, just shop around a little bit. A lot of times in these tourist towns, there will be multiple vendors selling the same thing. So let's say you want one of those rock turtles and it's 1,600 pesos in one shop, and you go to another one next door and it's 500 pesos. This kind of thing happens a lot. So walking next door, you might save yourself 1,000 pesos. Also, if you show interest in an item, you ask how much it is, and then you're like, I don't know. Frequently, you'll see the price drop precipitously as they're trying to get that sale, and oftentimes there's a lot of room for that price to fall where they can still make some good money on it. Something else that's going to save you some money is knowing Spanish. Like one time I walked into an artesania shop, I asked how much an item was, and I'm talking to the shop owner in Spanish, and he's like, I'm going to give you a great price because you speak Spanish. And I laughed because I thought it was a joke, and he's like, no, I'm dead serious. You're getting a better price because you speak Spanish. So knowing some Spanish can show that you know more about the culture. It can show that you know more about how much things should cost, but also it allows you to connect with people, connect with the shop owner in their language. And when you can do that, they're more likely to like you. And when they like you, they give you a better price. If you would like to start learning some Spanish, my favorite course can be found at tangerinespanish.com. This is probably the best value out there. Awesome, super thorough course that's going to get you speaking full sentences really quickly. So go check that out, tangerinespanish.com. I highly recommend it. Another way to avoid being gringo priced is to get legal residency in Mexico, because sometimes there's different prices for residents versus non-residents. For example, I was near Cancun and had to go to the emergency room. And when I was there, they asked me if I lived there, and I said yes. And then they asked for proof, and I was like, why? And they said that the prices for residents are significantly lower than for tourists. So I had to either show them a residency card or a lease or some kind of proof that I actually lived there to get the local price instead of the tourist price. Another common thing you'll see is that at historical sites, there may be a higher price for foreigners versus tourists. So I remember going to the fort in Bacalar, and at this fort they had a tourist price that was like 3 or 4 times higher than the price for locals. And if you can show your residency card showing that you're a local, well then you get the locals price. So I think this whole idea of getting gringo priced is way overblown, and it doesn't happen nearly as much as people think outside of those tourist destinations. Like, I'm living in the center of the country in Querétaro, Mexico. It's a city of like 1.5 million people that's mostly Mexicans, and in my everyday life here, it basically never happens. Pretty much the only time in my life when I get gringo priced is when I'm traveling to a tourist destination in Mexico. This isn't goodbye, because I'll see you over on this video, what they don't tell you about Mexico safety.